Today I am going to explain the action thriller movie called Captain Phillips 2013 based on a real incident of Somalia pirates. The movie begins in March 2009, with Captain Richard Phillips packing his luggage, verifying his passport, and double-checking his travel plans before heading to the airport with his wife, Andrea, at their home in Underhill, Vermont. They discuss their concerns about the changing times and worry about how their children will navigate a world where securing a good job is much more challenging than it was in their youth. Later they arrive at the airport, share a goodbye kiss, and Phillips heads inside. Meanwhile, in Isle, a small coastal village in Somalia, a convoy of vans carrying local mercenaries pulls in. Inside a hut, Abdulwali Muse is resting on the rough ground when a young boy rushes in to wake him. The mercenaries, working for a warlord named Garrett, are displeased that the villagers have not gone to sea in search of ships to hijack. The village elder explains that they successfully carried out hijackings in the past 2 weeks, but the mercenaries remain unsatisfied and insist they head out again immediately. Hufan, the village chief, directs Muse and another skiff commander, Assad, to each select 3 men and prepare for the journey. A crowd of eager men gathers, hoping to be chosen, offering either their skills or small bribes such as sprigs of khat, a plant that induces euphoria and suppresses appetite, which is useful for long sea voyages. Muse assembles his crew, including a young Somali named Bilal, along with Elmi and Naji, who come from a different village. Once their supplies are loaded, they set off for the mother boat. Before departing, Assad warns Muse to stay out of his way, calling him a thin rat. Muse harbors resentment toward Assad and dislikes how he orders Elmi around. At the port of Salalah in Oman, Captain Phillips arrives to take command of the MV Maersk Alabama, a cargo ship. He meets with his first mate, Shane Murphy, who updates him on the ship's route and the cargo they are transporting. Concerned about pirate activity off the Somali coast, Phillips instructs Murphy to ensure that all ship doors and hatches are securely closed and locked. Once the cargo is fully loaded, the ship sets sail on its journey. Captain Phillips conducts emergency drills at sea to ensure his crew is prepared for any potential crisis. His efforts prove valuable when he spots 2 small blips on the ship's radar shortly after a drill. He immediately informs Murphy about the approaching skiffs and instructs him to contact the U.S. Maritime Emergency. When there is no response from USME, Phillips orders a 5-degree port turn, and the skiffs follow suit. He then directs Murphy to notify the UKMTO about a possible piracy threat. The female MTO officer advises Phillips to adhere to protocols. As the skiffs draw closer, he notices the men on board are armed. Phillips promptly warns his 20-man crew, instructing them to take their positions. He picks up the radio and pretends to communicate with a military vessel in an attempt to deceive the pirates. Assad believes the transmission and commands his skiff to retreat, but Muse remains suspicious and orders his driver to accelerate. In response, Captain Phillips increases the ship's speed and executes evasive maneuvers. The resulting waves shake the smaller boat, but Muse insists that Elmi continue at full throttle. Eventually, the skiff's engine gives out, leaving them stranded. That night, Muse and his group reunite with their mothership to repair their engine. A heated argument breaks out between Assad and Muse, with insults exchanged. As tensions escalate, Assad aims his gun at Muse, unaware that Muse has a hidden wrench. Seizing the opportunity, Muse strikes and kills Assad, then takes his engine before setting off once more in pursuit of the cargo ship. Murphy spots them and alerts the captain. In response, Phillips instructs the crew to take their positions, orders evasive actions, and radios UKMTO for assistance. Moments later, the fire nozzle is activated, spraying water outward. Muse then radios Phillips, ordering him to stop the ship, but the captain ignores him and continues forward. In response, Naji fires his weapon, forcing them to steer closer. The fire hose fails as a deterrent, allowing Bilal to hook the improvised ladder onto the ship. One by one, the pirates climb up and board the vessel. Captain Phillips instructs the crew to take shelter in the engine room and keep the doors locked. On their way to the bridge, the pirates destroy every lock in their path. Upon reaching the bridge, they storm in, aiming their weapons at Phillips and 2 others. Muse approaches Phillips, assuring him that no harm will come to them if they cooperate. The pirates are thrilled to discover that the ship is American. Muse boldly proclaims himself as the captain. Phillips attempts to negotiate, offering them $30,000 to leave, but the pirates find the amount insufficient. Shortly after, the ship loses power as the chief engineer shuts it down. Muse demands an explanation, and Phillips tries to calm him by claiming the ship was pushed beyond its limits, causing the failure. Muse grows suspicious about the whereabouts of the rest of the crew, but Phillips feigns ignorance. When the crew remains hidden, Muse threatens to execute those on the bridge one by one, but his bluff fails. Determined to find them, Muse decides to search the ship. Taking Bilal and Phillips with him, Muse sets out to locate the missing personnel. Phillips suggests searching from the top down, but Muse, sensing deception, examines a ship diagram and insists they head directly to the engine room. As they proceed, Bilal almost discovers Murphy in a storage room, but Murphy manages to stay hidden. After the close call, Murphy warns the crew of the approaching danger and instructs them to prepare by spreading broken glass across the engine room floor. As the search party enters the engine room, Bilal steps in first and immediately injures his foot on the broken glass. Seeing this, Muse orders Bilal to escort Captain Phillips back to the bridge while he continues searching. In the darkness, Muse is suddenly ambushed by some of the crew members. One of them attempts to stab him, but Muse manages to block the fatal blow with his hand. The crew then radios the pirates on the bridge, informing them that they have captured Muse and are willing to trade him for Captain Phillips in exchange for $30,000 before disappearing. Phillips retrieves the money from the safe and hands it over to the pirates. Meanwhile, the crew releases Muse. However, as Phillips attempts to leave the lifeboat, Najee strikes him, slams the door shut, and the lifeboat descends into the water. The hijacking of the Maersk Alabama and the subsequent abduction of Captain Phillips aboard the lifeboat are quickly reported to the USS Bainbridge, a U.S. Navy vessel operating in the Mediterranean. The warship is instructed to head west to intercept the lifeboat. During the journey, Phillips offers to treat Muse's wounded hand and Bilal's injured foot. While Muse refuses any aid, he allows Phillips to bandage Bilal's foot. As Phillips casually takes out a knife to cut the bandage, Elmi panics and shouts in alarm. Najee quickly seizes the knife and orders Bilal to move away from the captain. Not long after, a drone locates the lifeboat as well as the crew of the Alabama who have been tailing it. The U.S. Navy estimates that it will take at least 36 hours for the warship to reach them, but they are determined to ensure the lifeboat does not reach Somalia. In response, the U.S. deploys a SEAL team. Meanwhile, Muse receives a call from Hufan, who informs him that the mothership is experiencing engine trouble. He also warns Muse that Garrett is furious over the failed mission and insists they head to Somalia immediately. The USS Bainbridge arrives, shining spotlights and blaring its horns to signal the sailors on the lifeboat. A man named Nemo, who speaks Somali, establishes contact with the pirates and initiates negotiations by offering them food and water. However, Muse responds by stating that their demand is $10 million. Najee remains suspicious, convinced that the Americans are trying to trick them. Despite his concerns, Muse agrees to meet with the Navy. Soon, 2 gunboats approach the lifeboat and demand to see Captain Phillips. To prove he is unharmed, Muse moves Phillips to the lifeboat's doorway for visibility before shoving him back inside and continuing his discussion with Nemo. Though the Navy offers him food and water, Muse refuses, insisting that he will accept nothing less than $10 million. As the conversation progresses, Najee becomes increasingly anxious and fires his gun. Concerned that Phillips might have been hit, the gunboats are immediately ordered to retreat. Muse quickly contacts Bainbridge to assure them that Phillips is unharmed and has Phillips confirm this over the radio. He then informs the commanding officer that he will reach out again once they arrive in Somalia. After nightfall, 2 additional warships join the USS Bainbridge. Meanwhile, aboard the lifeboat, Phillips asks for permission to relieve himself. Muse allows it, giving Phillips the chance to shove Bilal into the water and attempt to swim toward the Navy ships. Although the Navy spots them, they struggle to distinguish between the 2 men. Najee attempts to shoot at them but is stopped by Muse, who then jumps into the water and retrieves Phillips, dragging him back to the lifeboat. Upon their return, Najee viciously beats the captain. Later, Navy SEALs arrive, assume tactical control, and establish radio contact with Muse. The negotiator begins addressing the pirates by name and mentioning their origins, further persuading them by claiming that elders from their tribe are being brought aboard the Bainbridge to help negotiate Phillips' ransom. Muse ultimately agrees to board the warship to meet with the Navy and the elders. At the same time, SEAL snipers take their positions, preparing for action. A skiff is sent to the lifeboat to attach a tow rope and retrieve Muse. The team also discreetly installs a listening device on the exterior of the lifeboat. A sailor throws a bag to Phillips, advising him to wear the shirt inside for warmth and to remain in the same spot. Meanwhile, aboard the warship, the SEAL snipers focus on identifying and confirming visual contact with all 3 pirates inside the lifeboat before executing their mission. As instructed, Phillips puts on the yellow shirt when Bainbridge begins towing the lifeboat. Najee, growing agitated, yells at Phillips to stay still, warning that Elmi dislikes any movement. He then orders Elmi to shoot if Phillips moves again. Despite the sniper's efforts, they struggle to get a clear sight of all three pirates as the raft drifts closer. Realizing his fate might be sealed, Phillips grabs a pen and paper to write a farewell note to his family. However, Naji notices and takes the materials away. Enraged, Phillips retaliates, attacking Naji with punches and shoves. Bilal and Elmi quickly assist in subduing him, tying him up. Naji then turns on the radio, demanding to know the whereabouts of the elders. Realizing they were deceived and that no elders are coming, he concludes that the Americans have been lying to them all along. Convinced they are doomed, Naji prepares to execute Phillips. With tensions at their peak, the snipers confirm visuals on Bilal and Elmi but still cannot see Naji. The commander orders the tow to stop, causing Naji to stumble forward and become visible through a window. With all three targets in sight, the command to fire is given. Gunshots ring out and Phillips screams as blood splatters onto him. As silence takes over, his blindfold slips, allowing him to witness the horrifying scene. Shortly after, the order to capture Muse is issued. He is quickly placed on the deck, handcuffed and taken into custody. As he realizes his crew has been killed and Captain Phillips is now safe, Muse lowers his head in defeat. The movie concludes with Phillips being rescued from the lifeboat and brought aboard the Bainbridge, where a medic tends to his injuries. In a state of shock and grief, he struggles to respond to her. Later, Phillips asks if his family has been informed of his safety. The chief assures him that they have been notified and that he will be able to contact them soon. Months later, Phillips is reunited with his family. Meanwhile, Muse is convicted of piracy and sentenced to 33 years in a federal prison in Indiana. The following year, Captain Phillips returns to sea.